When a family goes on vacation in the countryside, they discover something is a little amish. Hello and welcome to RotD Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2018 movie, The Harvesting. Well, I say 2018, IMDb says 2018, Rotten Tomatoes says 2017, the movie database says 2015. I have a feeling this movie was wrapped in the can around 2015, and they've just been struggling to find a distributor and release since. But regardless, I have found it, I have watched it, and I am reviewing it now. So, what I ultimately found from this movie was something that was a bit rough around the edges and didn't wind up coming to the screen in a cohesive fashion to deliver a quality horror movie. But there is a nugget in there. There's an egg that's just unhatched right in the middle of it that I saw and I think is really, really interesting, and I would love to have had the incubation process of that egg properly done to see it fully hatch into what I think could have easily been a very good horror movie. But regardless, the heat lamps weren't on, it wasn't in the right place, who knows, it just wasn't given the care that it deserves. But regardless, I would really like to see more out of this director, to see what he can continue coming up with as he continues to grow. Same with the writer, Ben Everhart. The director is Ivan Krajewicz. But I would like to see more out of both of them, just to see if they can build off of this and continue to improve either independently or together. Regardless, to get into more specifics and more details, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one followed a family that was mother, father, son, and daughter. Young kids, that the mother and the father are having marital issues. They're seeing a marriage counselor, and they decide, in an attempt to reconnect, Hail Mary pass to try and save things, they would take a vacation in the countryside and isolate themselves a bit, get away from technology and from Wi-Fi signals, and just make it about the family. Which goes over like a lead balloon with the kids, obviously, the son especially, who's a little bit older. But that's just the general intention. Now, when I think I'm going on vacation to the countryside, I'm thinking, well, I'll be up there in a cabin for, a week or so. But no, they're in a pretty nice, looks like house all to themselves, pretty lavish as far as that goes. You get the sense that they're fairly well off, and if that doesn't sell you on the fact that they're fairly well off, apparently this vacation is the entirety of the summer, which I have never taken a vacation like that in my entire life. But regardless, they do. And when they get there and they get settled, they are noticing some odd goings-ons, especially in the neighboring woods, just general creepy feelings. The kids are noticing some things. The supernatural element of the movie kind of just takes off from there, mostly centered around this unnamed feeling / entity / whatever in the woods. And alongside their storyline is the storyline of neighboring Amish community that has experienced a pretty radical tragedy regarding the woods. That a young man went into the woods, and when he came out, he enacted a act of murderous rage, and now the community is attempting to reconcile that. So you have these two storylines kind of going on as neighborly, both encountering the same issue in the woods, and they wind up coming together in the end. Now, again, there was some really good elements to this movie that I think were just improperly handled, but from a plot standpoint, giving the plot a rating, I gave this a 14 out of 25. I actually thought, like I said, there was something really decent embedded in there. And from a writing / plot standpoint, There were two major sins that I could really think of. A lot of the failings of this movie are in the technical category, which I'll get into, but I think from a writing standpoint, there was more that they could have done with the concept of the woods to make it more mysterious, more ominous, and more clear cut. And the other remaining points that I deducted from the 11 points that were taken off of the score were in regards to the dialogue. This really struck me as Ben Everhart, the writer, he knew he had a good idea and he knew how to flesh it out to a degree, but the dialogue was pretty painful in places. And I think that, if he were to, practice makes perfect, he needs to work on dialogue. That was not that great. The acting performances I'll get into, but there was a fairly limited subset of material that they were able to work with just in regards to believable dialogue. The intent, I gave a 7 out of 25. This delivered a halfway interesting story with halfway interesting characters. The movie itself wasn't terribly scary, and that for a horror movie is a pretty big failing. This was trying to be scary. It did have some good creepy elements to it, but I don't think that they were ever really brought above that level, and they should have been. That was a pretty big failing. When they have that strong of a good foundation built, and you bring it up to that level where you have successfully creeped the audience out and got them interested enough in the characters to go that next step further and actually deliver some true scares is not a huge one. You've already done the hard work, but this movie just kind of tripped on its own shoelaces in that regard. The acting, I gave a 10 out of 25. There were okay enough performances in here. Nothing to write home about, but certainly I would say nothing that were just absolutely terrible. Elena Caruso as Dinah the mother felt a bit stiff and stilted. Chris Connor, who played the father of Jake, there was some elements, some Jack Torrance-esque kind of elements of influence going on there that I thought he did okay. But nobody ever really rose beyond the point of too much beyond one-dimensional. And again, I think that it would have been better if they had some better dialogue to work with, but I think everything was just a little rough around the edges as far as this goes. And that leads me to the technical, which I think is the biggest failing of this movie, which I gave a 5 out of 25. To have something really decent in the middle to work with, this was like a fine quality wood that the technical aspects of this movie were never really able to whittle into that finished product of the art piece. The editing was just all wrong. The tone and the tempo, everything that would deliver the scares, like I said, beyond that creepy point and into the actual scary point, I think is an issue in the editing room, and it just really kind of fell apart in that regard. The movie could just never really find its own pace, and I think that this is a movie that, I don't want to give any spoilers. These reviews I try to do spoiler-free, but what I will say is this is a movie that I have a feeling that the writing, the directing, and the editing and everything was basically trying to operate in service of look how clever we are with this ending. And you really just can't do that. You can't do that to the degree where you forget about the rest of the movie and that you're supposed to be delivering a good, scary horror movie with interesting characters and quality plot lines. I think that in the editing room, they really could have done more. Like I said, with the plot, with the making the woods more ominous, I think the editing could have also lent itself to that a bit more. There was just, when you have something like the evil woods, you really need it to be not as ambiguous as this movie made it. There were scenes where they were standing not in the woods that looked like they were in the woods. They had scenes where they were in the woods that almost looked like they were in the clearing. if you're going to have this evil border, you really need to have it visually clear cut when people are safe, when people are not, and what that means when they're not. It needs to be fairly a good contrast between the two and fairly consistent in that. And it just wasn't. And I think the editing was a huge portion of that, not to mention the multiple times that it tried for jump scares, and it just really didn't work. I think was also an editing issue. So that gives us a total score of 36 out of 100 points. Would I recommend this one? I actually wouldn't. I wouldn't. But I am excited to see where they can go from here. What this director can do, what this writer can do. I've already covered that. So thank you for joining me today. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, I would love to hear from you in the comments. If you've watched this movie and you found it to be something different than I did, please leave comments. I would very much like to have your input on it. Other than that, I thank you for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.